So our speaker tonight is Deon Gill. He's a database administrator at Fred Hutch in the Vaccine Infectious Diseases Division, working for SHARP, which does infectious disease clinical trials. He supports several hundred statisticians who are monitoring these drug trials real time to see if they're working or not. So they're getting data churns every hour where they're reloading data from labs. Sharp has been using Postgres for over 20 years now, but Deon is new to it. I mean, he's used MySQL before, but now he's using Postgres for the last 2 years. So he is new to it, but he's works half-time in the database side. He works the other half-time in the infrastructure side, where he has worked in that field before, doing networking and incident responses for like getting images. So he's got a good breadth across on being able to handle the hardware side and then learning the Postgres database administration side also. So he's got a presentation on that tonight.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Welcome. So I'm doing my presentation on building a Postgres server from scratch. As Lloyd said, it may be very niche. I am working as a system administrator and a database administrator for Fred Hutch, which I've been doing for about 2 years now. So I deal with all of the back end and dealing with the database end. So this is just what my experience. What we're going to cover is hardware. So what specs and everything. The configuration management tools that you can use. Basically, I'm going to go over Chef because that's what we're currently using. But there is other ones. There is Ansible and Puppet that you could also use as your configuration management tools. And then we're going to run over using Postgres with Chef, as well as compiling Postgres with extensions, and then configuring Postgres. The last part is going to be about high availability and replication. So, setting up your Postgres server. Again, this is a disclaimer. What I have up here for the consideration is what we're using for one of our heavy use databases. So what we have is we're using 2 Intel 5320 CPUs, and they're 26 cores at 2.20 gigahertz. The RAM, we're using 256 RAM for our servers. This is each server is using these specifications, and they each have 3.75 terabytes of usable storage space. And the operating system that we are currently using to run our servers are Linux, specifically Ubuntu. We are mostly a Ubuntu environment. So just hardware in general. So again, my disclaimer: the hardware that you're going to use for your Postgres servers always depends on your workload. Sometimes if you don't have a bigger server, you won't be using the specifications that I listed in the slide before. Really heavy workloads can sometimes get away with less powerful hardware. So again, what your specifications is for your stuff, but they can benefit from faster storage. And then you have write-heavy workloads. They put a lot of strain on both your CPU and your storage. So you're going to need a lot more stuff for your servers. And then if you're running replication, you're using 2 servers. This is also going to increase your resources. So you're going to need more to have replication for those 2 servers. And this is just a picture of what we have in our current one of our cabinets that we're using right now. So this is the back end. Our network shows we have some older servers, so they do use KVMs. They don't have express iDRACs. And then this is just the front. This again, one of our cabinets, it doesn't have a bunch of servers in there. We kind of put our servers in different cabinets depending on what requires the most. So this one, because most of the servers in this requires a lot, we don't put a bunch of servers in there, so that's why you see there's only 4 for each one. The location of that, So I work at Fred Hutch, so we work down in South Lake Union. So we just have a little server room. Uh, and we share our server room with another division. So we have about 5 6 cabinets with each different server. So it's Postgres servers along with just we have our F5 and stuff like that. So
So there's not a single server room at Fred Hutch. There's multiple server
yeah,
rooms in different buildings.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and we have Sharp has servers in more than one server room.
So we're going to go over configuration management. So again, that was what we're going over Chef. So Chef is just a configuration management automation tool. One thing I learned working with it is that Chef uses Ruby. I spoke with Lloyd about it. This was something he didn't know as well, but we found out that so Chef is using Ruby pretty much to write all your recipes and your cookbooks. So again, recipes are just what you use to define. It's a step-by-step how you define how your systems should be configured. Uh, and then those recipes are going to be organized into cookbooks. So depending on how you have your stuff set up, your Postgres cookbook, you have a cookbook for Postgres, and you can have a cookbook for your workstations. So each one is defined. That's where your recipes are going. That's how it's going to define how those servers are going to be set up, what is going to be put in there, your extensions, how you're compiling everything. And how you use it is Chef connects to your GitHub repository. You're going to be using that to push your changes and then doing version controls in your environments. So, automating Postgres with Chef. So automating Postgres with Chef, these are going to be the benefits. So you have streamlined infrastructure. So you're defining your Postgres environment, your database creation, your user management, your configuration settings, all that's going to be in your code. And again, that's what you're setting up in your cookbook. You're going to have a specific cookbook set up to do each of these things. Another benefit is scalability. So as your applications grow, you can easily use your code to scale your Postgres clusters by adding new nodes and configuration and adjusting your configurations. So if you never need to add another Postgres server, you already have your cookbook set up, and you can easily just add it in there for your cookbooks. And then provisioning. So you can, again, automatically install Postgres on your servers, and you configure it to your specifications. And you can even use your cookbooks to handle your upgrades. So how we do it is whenever we need to upgrade our servers, we have it set to just by the node host name, whatever version of Postgres we're using, you can just put in there the Postgres version, and it's going to push it to that server to install it.
The other great thing about using Chef is disaster recovery.
Yes.
The same thing for other ones like Puppet is I think it's every quarter we need to test, burn down and rebuild. So with this we can bring up a VM and run Chef on it and actually rebuild our servers completely, any one of our servers, and rebuild it and test it to make sure that our rebuild process works. Because that has to be logged with quality to verify that we can do it. So, yes.
And we do it just even out of disaster recovery if we see a server that's having an issue and needs to be rebuilt. So one of our secondary servers. Oh.
Sorry, you mentioned you have 2 hardware servers.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you just run bare on them 2 instances of Postgres, or use VMs and then you have different?
We do both.
Yeah.
It depends on the performance of the server. So most of the servers we're running a single VM on the bare bones to run Postgres within. But on our most highest performance ones, we run it bare bones without using a VM, so we can actually get the extra performance boost. So we run both scenarios. And Chef will build both the bare bones and it will build the VM. So whether for any of our servers, even if it's not a Postgres server, it will build the bare bones, and if there's VMs on, it can build the VMs too. So, yeah.
And I guess this is the workflow that we're currently using. So when you're writing your code or you need to update anything, you're pushing it to your Chef server. That's going to your cookbooks, your repository. That's going to get pushed out to GitHub so you can commit your code changes. Once you commit those code changes, if you want to test those codes, what we have set up is we have a specific service, a Jenkins server, so that tests the code out and makes sure that the code is good before actually pushing it out to any of the servers or nodes. Once it builds successfully that code, it's going to send that node. It's going to send it out to the node, so it's going to run that code to install, configure your nodes, your servers. Next, we're going with streamlining Postgres extensions with Chef. So if you don't know what Postgres extensions are, they're just add-on modules that you can use to supercharge your database. They unlock new features. So there's some examples of some Postgres extensions. You have PostGIS, pgtap, and then you have timescale.db. And then these are customized functionality to fit your exact needs. So whatever extensions you need to run for your environment, those are the extensions that you have. And why use Chef with these extensions? So you get to define your databases in a clear, repeatable way. Again, if you're having what Lloyd mentioned, disaster recovery, if you need to build up a database server from scratch to make sure that you have disaster recovery, you're using Chef. So you don't have to build your extensions by hand. Everything's being installed. It's based off of what you've already had configured in Chef. All you're doing is pushing those changes or those changes to your database and your server. Automation, again, installing, configuring, and updating your extensions effortlessly. If you need to update your extensions, all you're having to do is go to that cookbook, go to that specific recipe, and change out where you're getting that version. If there's a new version, you're just putting the new link of how to get that version in there. And then consistency. So you're ensuring that you have the same extensions present across your environment. So every Postgres server you have, whatever extensions you're going to have in there, they're already configured in that cookbook. It's going to go out to all your servers and all your databases, specifically what you need. Good.
Are you guys building Postgres from scratch, or are you taking a pre-built?
So we are building Postgres from scratch. I think that's what we've been doing for the longest time. If I'm not,
We've always done that because when I started, we were on Sun Solaris. We've gone through various different versions of Linux. We didn't start with Ubuntu. We started with other ones.
Yeah.
So we've gone through a variety of things, and not always were there packages available, or the OS to the Postgres version that we were running was not available. So we always build from scratch.
Yeah, because our environment, I think.
So everything is compiled.
There's how add this, delete that, options.
Yeah. That's actually, I think, was on one of the other slides. This is just a example of, if the text is too small, excuse me. So this is just building the extension in Chef. So the example I'm using is a timescale extension that we're using to compile and build. This is just part of it. So let's see, it's getting the GitHub repository. So that's where we're getting the version of the extension that we're going to use. And this is compiling it and installing it onto that server. So look, if we have where the location, the file path is going to be, what Postgres version we're using, and from there it's building the environment. Then it's building the arguments, which is compiling the timescale database or timescale DB extension. It's building the directory, and then it's putting it in the environment, and then we're bootstrapping it to install it to the server. And as Lloyd was mentioning, so key benefits of compiling your Postgres extensions with Chef, he did mention, so improved consistency, reduces the risk of error, so you're not having to do it manually yourself every single time you're building up a Postgres server. And then you may have Postgres OS versions where there are no packages, which he was mentioning before. So a lot of time we've been, at least when I started, we were running Ubuntu 18 and upper versions of Postgres, and so we're having to build these packages to make them work. So there's no packages in that one because the OS we were using is so old, which we're now updating our OS versions across their environment. And then configuring Postgres for secure access. So this is just an example of the Postgres auto.conf file. I think that most people know what it does, but this is our example for one of our heavily used servers, databases. So why we have it set the way we do. I think we recently just changed our workman from 30 to 15 because we were having memory issues. So this may be a little bit old, like a couple of days.
And that's basically from the change from Postgres 12 to Postgres 15, and we're seeing more memory usage, and so we needed to drop down the workman.
Oh yes, because we went from Postgres 12 to Postgres 15, we are finding that it uses more memory, so we had to drop the workman from 30 to 15. So we're getting out of memory errors that we found out that's been happening recently. So we had to drop that down. This is just another part of the Postgres auto.conf file. This is our auto vacuum and how we set in our logs. And I think there's one more. So yeah, this is the last part. So we have our wall log hints on, where we have our secondary and our primary. So you'll see the two primary connection information. So we have set for what our primary is and what our secondary is, and then we're just our HBA conf file and setting secure access. So again, trying to set up access of who has access to the server. This is a couple of our servers. And this is second one. So our IP hosts. I'm sure everybody's. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead and describe that top line.
So this is what we have set up to our server, where we have, of course, the user Postgres, and then we have our group, which is the Sharp users. We have what access it has to it, and what specific IP addresses have access to our databases. And I know you wanted to add something.
So when you that third column, that third column there, which says Postgres, plus Sharp users, that can either be a user or a group. So the plus Sharp is specifying that as a group. So everybody within the Sharp users group will use that connection to log in. And if you'll notice, the LDAP is slightly different between the two connections. One is going to the DC Sharp and the other is going to the DC non-Sharp. So they're going to different LDAPs attributes for the connections. And by the way, all these IP addresses are not our real IPs. They've all been fudged. Just so you know.
Thanks. Then our last one is high availability Postgres. So we talked about having a secondary server for replication, but also just for failovers. So sometimes you may have unplanned outages, whether it be hardware failures, software crashes, or network issues. Then we have our planned outages, which is sometimes you got to upgrade your OS or you're upgrading Postgres, and they can disrupt your application's server. So it's best to have a backup server just in case you have those issues. And then so failover ensures that there's automatic switchover to the standby database server, and it's minimizing your downtime and your data loss. And the benefits of having a replica is increased uptime. So you rapid recover from failures, your data redundancy, so it's multiple copies data for protection, and then your load balancing, which is distributing read traffic across servers to improve performance. And that's it. Thank you.
So for something like a major version upgrade, you have some windows to work
We do. So we can schedule outage windows and do the upgrades. We don't have to be up those 4.9 situation. While technically we only need to support it during business hours, I see stuff at 11 o'clock at night. I'm on calling infrastructure on the phone, to get things up and running. So at least we have one server up and running, not both down. If we need to do a failover, but yeah, we don't have that ultra high availability. We don't need that for what we do, because we can skip a day and fix it the next day and be fine. We're not going to leave it for the weekend. We'll get on it, but we don't have to be super high.
I guess anything on site, it's my job to go on site to take a look at and make sure that if I need to replace something.
He's like one of the closest IT people.
Yep. So anytime there's something that needs to be done on site, I am the one person. Everybody lives far away now because we're all working remote. So I'm the on-site person for anything that breaks.
Yeah, the farthest away infrastructure person is Concrete. Yeah, he lives more downtown.
Yeah.
So yes.
Which I was on site today. So yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? And then after that, I'll hop and do a quick trip report. All right, cool. Thank you, Deon.
We need PDFs.
Yeah, can you pull up that PDF? The other one. Wait a minute.
I'm not really sure.
Do you have to move it to the other screen? I don't see it. They need to see it, not me.
What name is not?
Oh no, it's just PowerPoint, sir. You just got to turn off PowerPoint. PowerPoint took over your screen. That's it. There we go.
Is this a slide?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Sweet.
Cool. All right. Can you just take a glance at my laptop screen and make sure you see this? Okay, then I have to figure out how to make this bigger so everybody can see it. There we go.
I'm gonna reshare.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Folks, 1 second while we share the screen. Oh, yeah. Share the screen. That way it's recorded. Entire screen, please. All right. Is it there? You see it? Great. Okay, I'm going to do a quick trip report from the pgconf.dev conference last week in Vancouver. This will be fast. Oh, funny. It's getting covered up at the bottom by an advertisement to convert. Can I get rid of this? Let's find out. Hey, it worked. Okay, so I'll be quick. So there were 5 of us from the Seattle user group here that went to this conference last week in Vancouver. So just a little bit of background, first of all. This conference has been going on for a long time. It's once a year. It used to be in Ottawa. This year was the first year they ever did it in Vancouver, which is really an awesome privilege for us in Seattle because we're so close. That was awesome. This conference historically has always drawn more Postgres developers than any other conference. There's a lot of important meetings, community and developer meetings that happen here. And I thought this was really funny, so I threw it on a slide here. Last week, there were so many Postgres developers at this conference that there were no commits for 6 days, which was the 4th longest gap in the entire history of Postgres. And it was the longest gap in over 20 years. So it was like evidence of like how many developers are at this conference. And I grabbed Jonathan's tweet too. He's like, I'm not sure how I feel about being part of the longest time between commits. If I understand correctly, I think the person who like put the next commit in, I think was Nate Bossart. And he said if he'd known, he would have waited longer because he didn't realize it. We kind of put all this together after the fact. So that's kind of cool. And then let's see. The other thing about this conference that I think is important to understand, and I took a slide from last month's talk, but is where it fits in to the Postgres development cycle. That's part of why it's so important. And this is the one that's over there on the right. This is dev meeting at pgconf. And you'll notice that that sits right next to the beta and a little bit after the feature freeze before the branch. And that's exactly where we are right now. The feature freeze is done for Postgres 17. The first beta just came out. And this conference is an opportunity for a whole bunch of people. There were tons of sessions where people had a chance to talk about the work they did over the past year and these new features, because feature freeze is done. At this point, there's nothing new going. Postgres 17 won't come out till the fall, but it's already, like, it's locked in. Now, things could come out if there's stability. You know, there's still like a bunch of work on the betas, but nothing new goes in. Nothing big and new is going to go into Postgres 17. So this conference was key to hear about all the stuff. People talk about their own work that they did that's going in 17, and also for developers just to meet, talk, and plan. But the other thing that's kind of missing from here is that this picture is actually a year and a half, not a year. And that conference also should have been over on the left, right next to CF1 and branch 15, because this conference also is where we kick off the cycle for Postgres 18. And there were a number of meetings last week in Vancouver that were very much about, like, what are important things that we want to tackle this year, which will eventually make it into Postgres 18. So that's why this is an important conference. Just the timing tends to be perfect. It's right at the beginning of the next major and right after the feature freeze for the current major. And that's what we did in Vancouver last week. Just as an aside, I mentioned Postgres 17 beta just came out. I couldn't resist throwing a couple slides in. This was like yesterday. Mark Callahan does a whole bunch of like benchmarking and stuff, and he noticed some really cool performance improvements coming in 17. But y'all can look at that later if you want. I think we isolated it down to some work that Peter Gagan did. All right, so this conference. It is a 4-day conference, or it was last week anyway. 1 day pre-conference, 2 days of general sessions, 1 day of an unconference. This is a picture of the Seattle Postgres user group. These are all our friends here in Seattle, well, except for Kacey, who didn't make it to dinner with us that night because she had some other, I think, family stuff. But there you see, there we are, all of our Seattle people. We got together for a meal. I put here on the bullet point just some of the things that happened, and really 2 notes I think it was worth highlighting. All the general sessions are recorded, and they are going to go on YouTube probably in a week or two at some point. I kind of made up the week or two because I'm guessing, but that's not a promise from them. It's just kind of like whenever the company that did the recording, they just have to process it and do some production work before they can upload it. And then the other thing, it may not be in Vancouver next year. We don't really know. I have a feeling it might not be, but it will be in Canada. They stay in Canada. Canada tends to be a location people can get to from both places like China and Japan, as well as places like Europe, and the visa situation works out well for a lot of people as well. And we have people from all over the world that come into this conference, which is why that works as a location. Dealing with visas to the U.S. is a bit more complicated.
There's 4 cities. There's 4
Yeah.
cities in the running: Vancouver, Ottawa, Toronto, and the other one that's east of.
Yeah, okay. Let me repeat that for the Vancouver, Ottawa, Toronto, and a 4th one that neither Lloyd or I can remember, but it's somewhere further east. It's the only other one with a major airport. Is it Calgary?
No.
I'm gonna see now. Now we're embarrassing ourselves. I shouldn't have started listing things. Only trouble will come of this. Oh, Montreal. There you go. Now the people in Montreal hate us. All right, because this will get anyway. All right. So those are my quick summaries for that pre-conference. The one pre-conference thing that I participated in. Okay, a major theme this year was extensibility. There was a whole bunch of content in Vancouver and a lot of discussions around. And extensibility primarily in terms of extensions, but not only, because also there are a lot of people who are taking the Postgres code and extending it and using it in various ways to build sort of like other things. Aurora is like one example, but there's a ton. There's a ton of examples out there. And that also is another kind of extensivity of it. So this extension ecosystem summit was a pre-conference. There was a whole bunch of people. We split out into working groups. It was kind of an unconference style thing, and a lot of really good discussions. The 2 big things that I sort of took away on the extensions front were David Wheeler, who kind of organized this summit and is on the right standing up in the picture, is sort of rebooting the Postgres extension network, creating a version 2 of it. It's been around for a long time, like 10, 15 years, but it's just sort of, it's time. There's a whole bunch of things that we look out there, and we see like how distribution is done for, say, Python, Perl, like Go. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of better ways to do it. We want to learn from all of that. So the second thing was Yuri, and I'm forgetting his last name off the top of my head. I should know this. Also, separately from what Dave is doing, this just kind of organically evolved at the conference, but a group of people started, right now I think it's based on GitHub. It's some kind of a networking thing for people that are working around extensions to just sort of stay connected, be discussing common concerns, whether it's APIs for extensions, whether it's things like how upgrades are handled, things that extension authors and maintainers have concerns about that, it makes a lot of sense to sort of keep in touch and kind of coordinate with getting changes in core and just coordinate best practices and things like that for extensions. So those were two big things came out on that front. Okay, the keynote. We had Margot Seltzer, who is awesome. She is one of the co-creators of Berkeley DB, which is everywhere if you don't kind of know what that is. So it was pretty cool they got her to come. The main thing that she talked about in her keynote was two kind of emerging developing hardware technologies, CXL and GPU. Now GPUs are kind of out there, very established, obviously, not going anywhere. But her talk specifically focused on database applications, because we aren't really leveraging GPUs a lot for databases right now, and there are clearly the prices are going to come down. There's going to be economies of scale over time, so it's a very good thing to think about, what should we be doing with GPUs and databases. The second thing was CXL, which is super interesting, more of kind of an emerging thing. And my read on it was we're still kind of figuring out how it's going to land, but it looks really, really interesting. It's a way to kind of connect memory for multiple processors together, even across machines and across the network. So it makes me think of similar things as NUMA did back in the day. I feel like that's not as big of a thing now as it was 10 or 15. I don't hear about it as much as I did 10 or 15 years ago. So this is a really interesting emerging technology too. There's a lot of activity in that area. She talked about it, and again, database applications. So it's a cool keynote. Yeah. What's that? Berkeley DB. What is Berkeley DB? Berkeley DB was back when Linux and when Unix was being first set up. It was, oh boy, how do you describe it? It's kind of a key value store database, but they needed a basic database to use for all the utilities they were building in Unix. And this just kind of ended up being the thing that got built. And I think she was a student or something at the time. She told the story. I hope the recording gets posted online at the keynote. It'd be really cool. It's fun to watch. But Berkeley B, it's well known. Oracle eventually bought it, but it's also just something that is embedded absolutely everywhere in almost everything that you use. A whole bunch of common utilities in Unix have Berkeley DB embedded in them and used in them. There are kind of some core algorithms in there that have just become ubiquitous and used all over the place. She has a lot more that she's done as well. That just tends to be one of the things that she's especially well known for, and it was a really long time ago, and it's everywhere. Okay, the Unconference was the last day. Unconference is super fun. I have this little picture on the right. Everybody got in this huge room, grabbed these giant pieces of paper Friday morning, wrote down a topic they thought was important. Nothing is planned ahead of time. And what we did was we stuck all the pieces of paper at the front of the room, consolidated some that were similar topics, and then just had votes. Everybody raised their hand and they wrote the numbers. And then basically just based on whatever had the most votes, they literally on the fly made a schedule for the day. And this was the schedule of the day. The three topics that got the most votes, this was super interesting. The one topic that got by far the most votes was multi-threading. And that kicked it off. One of the first unconference sessions, I was really surprised how much interest there was. And they came out of that session with a list of concrete tasks to work toward Postgres having threading support as opposed to the process model, and people's names next to them who said, I will work on this area, I will work on this area within the next 9 months or so. So this is stuff work that will be done in the Postgres 18 timeframe, which is really exciting. And it's also really cool that they kind of kept that unconference session focused on like, some concrete steps that can be taken. And the next two were community participation and the one that I wrote out in big letters, observability priorities. That also got a ton of interest as well. The main thing that came out of the observability unconference, which I helped facilitate, was, first of all, like, it's very clear that a ton of people are interested and feel like Postgres needs work in this area. Just the visibility into the engine, especially at runtime on busy production systems, could be better. There's stuff that's there, but there's a lot more that we want. So a ton of interest across a lot of different companies, across a lot of different people. And the thing that we came out from that was that, like, I want to say like maybe 20-ish people came up and wrote their names and emails down on a list and said that they wanted to start a special interest group around observability to try to drive some coordination and drive some very, get on the same page and then try to get some meaningful changes into Postgres 18, like improvements and enhancements into Postgres 18 that we can try to drive across the finish line. So that was the unconference. All right.
Before you change slides.
Sure.
So one of the ones I went to was
Oh, yeah.
Beyond Workmem suggesting sanely not OOM. And what we came out of that with is that they're going to, in Postgres 18, for each connection to Postgres, they're going to add how much memory it's taking up. So that, let's say you're running a connection puller, and it's still hanging on to memory when it's returned to the connection puller. You say, oh, that's more memory than I want it to hang on to. You could close the connection, which frees up that memory, and then create a new connection. So because Postgres doesn't always return the memory when you think it should, it does it later on, so it holds it on longer than you want it to, and you could just close the connection, which closes the process, which gets rid of the memory.
Nice. So that was the work memory unconference session. Okay, I saved the general session side for last. Because what I did was I talked to all 5 people and everybody sent me their favorite general sessions and I made a list. So the recordings are all going to go up on YouTube, but I thought this would be kind of a fun thing to do, these are sessions. I will say that the top 2, the inclusivity, like making Postgres hacking more inclusive, that one, there were several people in the user group that went to that session and said it was like really good. So that would be one that is highly recommended by multiple members of the group. And then secondly, the auto vacuum one, the second one there that Robert Haas did, and actually it's a picture of him. The bottom picture is Robert from that talk, giving that talk. That one as well, there were a couple of people that mentioned that. So those two, there were several people from the user group that attended those talks, said they were really good. Recommend finding the recordings. And then all of these other ones also are mentioned as well by different people. Now, what I'm going to do real quick is also, I'll pop back to this in a moment. Let's see. Right here. I also have, so Jamie was going to come tonight, just kind of had a family thing pop up and at the last minute wasn't able to make it out, but she sent me, she actually was intending to share these slides with all of you tonight, so she asked me to share them instead. I can't obviously explain it as well as she'll be able to, and I kind of already covered what the conference is, her favorite topics. Okay, but she highlighted these 2 talks. This was on the list, Adaptive Query Optimization. She has a quick summary slide that she put together, which is fantastic. I will probably, this is our last session for the spring, and then we go on summer. We have the barbecue next month, we go on break. Maybe in the fall I'll still get her to come back and like talk through the slides. But she talked about the challenges and the benefits, but what I really like that she did is this next slide where Jamie did a comparison between Postgres and like a similar feature set in Oracle, which is really cool. So talking about just kind of looking across both sides. And then she has at the bottom her personal experience on Oracle with their adaptive optimizer. Sometimes it slows down the database because it gets stats while doing queries. Uses resources, which can slow down the database even if plans are better. And she's excited to see if AQO and Postgres will overcome that. So that was from the one session she looked at. And then she also did for a second one. There were also other people that mentioned this online upgrade as well. So again, she kind of gives an overview of the key points and the benefits, and a similar type of thing talking about Golden Gate versus Postgres logical replication. While I leave that up for a second, the other feedback to share from user group members. I'll just, I think everybody's kind of catching up on sleep from the conference and didn't manage to make it out tonight, but they emailed me notes and they said share it with the group. So a couple other just highlights from the conference to share back. There was one session on IMGIST. Which one was it? I mentioned it in here. This is the session. It's multi-entry generalized search trees. So that session, the generalized search trees, Ben in particular said it was amazing. If you have multi-interval range data types and you want to index them, he said that was a really, really great talk, and that's a really, really great index type that he didn't know about before. He mentioned from the conference picking up several tools that can look for plan changes. He said that's certainly something he worries about, and it feels like things are getting better. The auto vacuum stuff stood out to him. He said he really hopes that that Aurora will pick up the PG-17 stuff soon because they're working in that area. Something about making sure that they don't toast compress PG vectors, which you can ask him maybe on July if he makes it to elaborate on that. And then from Kacey, she mentioned the intro to hacking on Postgres was super informative. It didn't get quite as technical as she had hoped it would, but it was a great overview of different parts of the process of hacking on Postgres. So that was the intro to hacking on Postgres session. And then, and then Kacey talked about the Postgres protocol session, which I also heard other people at the conference talking about. It was a really great talk about the Postgres protocol, whether it's good enough, some different ideas about like what some of the gaps are, and like even how do you address, you can't just change a protocol very easily. That's a very sticky thing, and so some different thoughts around that. The speaker is a maintainer of Citus PG Bouncer, so it's from the perspective of how that service interacts with Postgres. Kacey gave a plug for the collations talk that Jeff Davis and I gave. She said it was great. I'm a little biased, but I thought it was great too. That was my talk. And I think that's good. So I'll put this slide back up.
I'll give one more.
And then Lloyd. Yeah.
So I went to the auto vacuum talk, and while I give my own auto vacuum talk, so I know quite a bit about it, I actually learned something in Robert Haas's one, where I talk about, in my stuff, I talk about Event Horizon, which is the oldest running transaction, which is wet. Anything below that can be auto vacuum, and anything above it can't be. But there's two other things that affect the event horizon that I hadn't realized because I don't use them, and that is unused replication slots also affect the event horizon, and old prepared transactions. So not prepared statements, but prepared transactions also affect the event horizon. So that was two new things I learned from that auto vacuum talk, which I haven't heard in other auto vacuum talks before. So otherwise, it's a great talk to listen to.
Cool. And that's about it. I think that's all we got for tonight. So thanks everybody for coming out.
Jeremy,
Yeah.
can you ask me a favor? When you know these sessions are posted, can you make a meetup message for it?
Yes, I can send a meetup message out once the YouTube videos go up. Yeah, totally. And I'll post these online somewhere too. It might wind up on my blog or something because we don't really have I don't think we have a good user group website that would be effective for pushing it out. But I'll get these out somewhere. Hope it's helpful.
I think I saw David Wagner.